Monday to Friday from 9 p.m., then Saturday and Sunday from 7 p.m.
We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. This show is always live, broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park. We also stream live on YouTube every weekday morning between 9 and 12 a.m. with a show available on demand a little bit later in the day. Today we ask you a question. It's World AIDS Day. There continue to be many myths around us. We ask you, what are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? At SABC Newsroom, that's where you can send us your contribution. We'll put it up and have a discussion forum around it a little bit later in the show. But first, let's go to Elvis for our news update.
Thank you, Evan. The world unites in the fight against stigma, discrimination and HIV as it commemorates World AIDS Day. At the COP21 in Paris, the President, Zuma, tells world leaders that developed nations have an obligation to help developing countries. The Supreme Court of Appeal is finalizing a decision on whether to send Oscar Pistorius back to prison. Now, those are all your headlines, but first, before we get into it, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis, and thank you very much. Good morning to you at home as well. Now, in sports today, this is what we've got. Athletics Kenya president and vice president among 3 Kenyan officials suspended by the IAAF for subverting anti-doping laws. Messi and Neymar wonder why Luis Suarez was not shortlisted for the Ballon d'Or and insist that he should have been. This as defending champions, the Blitzbokke, arrive in Dubai for the HSBC 7th Series season opener. That's what we've got for you in the sports, 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up later, but our top story this morning. As delegates at the UN Climate Change Summit in Paris get down to detailed negotiations, much of the debate today will be about protecting the world's forests. Yesterday, President Jacob Zuma warned developed countries that failure to play their part in halting climate change will create the impression that they are not sympathetic to the impact of global warming on the masses. Addressing the climate summit in Paris, the president called for a legally binding agreement. President Zuma asked developed countries to take responsibility by honoring their commitments. One of the speakers today will be the heir to the British throne, Prince Charles. Our UK correspondent, Dan Whitehead, now joins us from Paris to give us an update. Dan, a very good morning to you, and can you tell us what can we expect from the Prince, taking into consideration everything that has been happening in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. Prince Charles is a huge advocate for climate change. He's been spearheading much of COP21, and he is here throughout the duration. And he will today, as you rightly say, be speaking about the world's forests and the priority to ensure that they are protected. And he will be saying that more needs to be done to ensure that the livelihoods of around 1 billion people who depend on forests around the world get that help which is needed. So that will also be a focus. Also on the sidelines of COP21, the US President Barack Obama will be meeting with his Turkish counterpart, President Erdogan. That will be at an event outside of COP21, but very much in the spotlight when it comes to the Syrian border and also the situation of the downing of that Russian jet a couple of weeks ago.
How was the reaction to President Jacob Zuma's comments?
Well, of course, every leader spoke yesterday, more than 140, and they all had 3 minutes. The messages were broadly the same, to be perfectly honest. A lot of goodwill, a lot of hope, and a lot of singing the praises that each country is doing lots to tackle climate change. But there certainly was a lot of support for President Zuma when it comes to his role of spearheading developing nations. And President Zuma, when I spoke to him last night, was keen to stress that he believes that this $100 billion, which was pledged at the previous COP in Copenhagen, is not enough. More money needs to be raised in order to support the developing nations when that comes to renewable energies, solar energy, and even nuclear power, which the President Zuma said is something that South Africa is specifically looking at. So he's calling on developed countries to do more to help those developing nations.
Now, as things are heating up at COP21, excuse the pun, what is the overall agenda for today?
Well, nearly all of the leaders, Barack Obama, as I say, is still in town, but nearly all of the leaders, including President Zuma, have now left. So the pomp and ceremony, which we saw yesterday, will now start to tone down, but it is still very much a high-level meeting, and top negotiators will continue to be here until the end of next Friday, but it's all about the real negotiations, and we won't really have a clear idea of just how successful they are until the final few days, when we find out whether or not there has been agreement right across the board. And of course, the overarching theme is to ensure that global temperatures do not rise by more than 2 degrees Celsius. But that is going to be a huge challenge, and the clock is ticking. It's going to need something between 40% and 70% reductions over the next 35 years to be able to achieve that goal. And it's a political nightmare to ensure that each government does its bit across the world in terms of a global responsibility to ensure that that aim is achieved.
Dan, thank you for your time.
We'll now listen to the Deputy President Ramaphosa on a message of support on World AIDS Day.
We are inspired by the many actions taken by South Africans from all walks of life over many years to achieve an AIDS-free generation. We have the biggest HIV treatment program in the world, with more than 3 million of our people on life-saving antiretrovirals. People are living longer and fewer people are dying of AIDS and TB. Life expectancy has increased from 53 years in 2006 to just over 62 years in 2013. We have reduced mother-to-child transmission further. This has been made possible because all of us have worked together and have risen to the challenge. We have acted in various ways, big and small, to spread information, to fight stigma, and to promote healthy lifestyles. We have made protection our priority, from classrooms to sports fields, from the factory floor to our homes, from our bedrooms to our boardrooms, and all corners of our society. Yet we are still faced with many challenges. The number of new HIV infections is still extremely high, particularly among young women and girls. We need to spread the word about prevention, encouraging all sexually active South Africans to use condoms. We need to encourage people to test for HIV and TB. We need to ensure that all those who need treatment receive treatment and that they remain on treatment. Our theme for World AIDS Day is Rise, Act, Protect. As a nation, we must rise to this challenge, determined and committed and confident that we can succeed. As a people and as individuals, we must act to inform, to support and to encourage. No action is too small. No contribution is wasted. We must protect ourselves and those who are nearest to us. We must protect the vulnerable. We must combat stigma and create an environment in which all can feel safe, comfortable to test and be treated. The end of HIV as a public health threat is in sight. As we commemorate World AIDS Day, let us work harder and with determination to secure an AIDS-free South Africa and indeed an AIDS-free world. I thank you.
So the message is clear. Prevention is better than cure. But for more on the story, let's now cross over to Eben Janssen for more news, interviews and reviews.
Yes, Elvis, thank you. We'll continue with our AIDS Day broadcast. Yes, South Africa, of course, is one of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa hardest hit by the HIV epidemic. Young people in this region continue to be of the populations at greatest risk for HIV infection, particularly young women. What is shocking, however, is the findings of the Human Sciences Research Council this year that 18% of people between the ages of 18 and 35 are HIV positive. This group constitutes the majority of people studying in institutions of higher learning, specifically technical and vocational education and training colleges here in South Africa. Let's just take a brief look at a summary of this report.
Data was collected from 5,651 students and 1,003 staff members. All TVET colleges were represented in the sample, which covered about 70% of campuses. Only first-year students and staff members were included in the sample. Male and female students were almost equally represented in the sample. About 88% of students were under the age of 25, and more than three-quarters were from urban areas. Among staff members, nearly 54% were female, about 90% were 25 years or older, and the great majority were urban dwellers. The racial composition of the two samples was slightly different, as shown in the table. The survey also cast some light on financial circumstances of students and staff, indicating that students were in more constrained circumstances than staff. The status of the students in terms of relationships was also highlighted. The striking feature is that 83% said that they were single. Information on living agreements indicated that 51% of staff members lived with their husband or wife, 8% with their sexual partner, while 23% indicated that they were in a relationship but did not cohabit. The composition of the sample in terms of sexual orientation is set out in the table, indicating the sexual preferences of the participants. The participants were also tested on their general knowledge of HIV and AIDS. Staff members consistently showed higher awareness and knowledge of HIV, AIDS and TB than students. There was a high awareness about sexual transmission of HIV and the role of consistent condom use in prevention. Curiously, the fact that refraining from sex prevents infection escaped 4 out of 10 students. Knowledge of mother-to-child transmission of HIV and of antiretroviral or ARV prevention was slightly lower than knowledge of sexual transmission. It is noteworthy that 30% of students and 19% of staff were not clear that AIDS cannot be cured. The study explored attitudes to condom use and revealed that about half of male respondents and a third of female respondents considered that condoms feel unnatural. In addition, 38% of male students and 40% of male staff felt that condoms changed the sensation. A relatively high percentage of respondents said they use condoms almost every time rather than sometimes. The HE-AIDS says while TVET colleges have the potential to become major assets in the endeavor to achieve national HIV and TB goals, this possibility has been neglected. HIV prevention, care and treatment services on campus are few and far between, and there is a lack of mobilization of students and talents to create a health-conscious and health-empowered sector.
More than 2 million people with HIV have been put on drugs to keep them alive and well in the past year alone. This, according to the United Nations. But medical experts say there needs to be an exponential rise to comply with new guidelines. A report from UNAIDS shows that the numbers on life-saving antiretroviral medication known as ARVs have doubled in 5 years, from 7.5 million in 2010 to 15.8 million today. However, Doctors Without Borders, whose volunteer doctors pioneered HIV treatment in sub-Saharan Africa, say that while the 2.2 million increase over the past year is good news, a faster take-up is now necessary. Now, to discuss this, we are joined from our Pretoria studios by UNAIDS Senior Policy Advisor Nancy Fee. A very good morning to you, Nancy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Nancy, it's World AIDS Day today, and I think everybody out in the streets, they want to know one thing. Are we winning the war, the fight against HIV/AIDS?
Well, we're winning the battles, but we need to work harder to win the war, basically. The number of people dying from AIDS has dramatically reduced in the past 15 years. And of course, there's a huge achievement. People are living longer and healthier lives. And we now have 15 million people around the world on ARVs. However, and it's a big however, we have about 5 more years to really reduce the number of new infections, to get more people on treatment, to really end AIDS as a public health crisis. And South Africa plays a very important role in this.
Tell us a little bit about South Africa. What have been our gains and losses? Where are we within the overall picture today?
Well, I think we can say it's a situation where the glass is more than half full, but we still need to achieve more. So we have 6.8 million people who are HIV positive, and that's the largest number in the world. It's about 1 in 6 of all people living with AIDS in the world are here in South Africa. The numbers on treatment have gone up tremendously, and we're now talking about more than 3 million people on treatment. But eventually, all 6.8 million people will need treatment. And a huge concern is also that it's estimated we have 330,000 new infections a year, and many of those are among young women and girls. So prevention really has to be a much bigger focus. And we have to really use the data we have to make sure we intensify our efforts where it's most needed, and also make sure that no one is left behind.
You mentioned the number 1 in 6 of all people living in the world are in South Africa. It's a staggering statistic if we think about it. At the UN, why do you guys think South Africa has sort of become the front line for HIV/AIDS?
Well, there's a lot of questions about that. The epidemic did get established here very strongly, and of course there were issues with the level of response in the beginning. But since 2009, the government has really improved the response and are now really moving forward in a very positive way. Certainly the fact there is huge movement within South Africa is an issue we look at with the epidemic. And of course, some of the social and cultural issues, some of the gender issues, like the fact of sugar daddies, the fact of young women getting into relationships with older men, all of that feeds into the epidemic.
Are you happy with the kind of collaboration that we're having between government, pharmaceutical companies and the like here in South Africa, but also globally?
Yeah, we've been working very carefully with the pharmaceutical companies, and actually South Africa has led the negotiations, often in helping to reduce the prices of the drugs, because South Africa's negotiating position is so strong. So we now have the drugs down to 1 single pill a day. And because South Africa is able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies in a very strong way, the prices have really been reduced. But what we're not seeing enough of is enough manufacture here in Africa. And that's something our executive director is pushing quite strongly. And there's an AU agreement on this, both for ARV, TB, and other drugs, that there has to be pharmaceutical security here in Africa, and there should be more local production, which will also bring jobs. So it's got another benefit to it, too.
Young people, especially young women, continue to be most at risk in South Africa and the wider Southern African region. How are we going to get on top of that problem?
Well, that's a huge concern. Clearly, there needs to be a more effective education program to young people. And that's something that we think has fallen a bit by the wayside in the last years, but which the government has recognized the need to strongly improve. The government has also been promoting some experimental, innovative ideas like promoting colored and flavored condoms, which tend to be very popular with young people. There's a very big integrated comprehensive prevention program starting in Gauteng and KZN called DREAMS, which is looking at comprehensive prevention to young girls and women. And so there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of concentrated effort, and also a very strong effort to use data to really monitor what we're doing and to improve the programs. But more needs to be done, for sure.
Nancy, thank you very much for joining us. That's UNAIDS Senior Policy Advisor Nancy Fee joining us live from the capital here in South Africa, Pretoria, our studios there. More needs to be done in dealing with young people. Of course, if you've just joined us today, it's World AIDS Day, a day to celebrate the lives of those who are infected and those who passed away because of this dreaded disease. It's been 27 years since AIDS Day was established, with this year's theme being the time to act is now. Now, our question of the day, what are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? We hear a lot of myths here in South Africa, a lot of beliefs that sometimes boggle the mind. But let's have a look at what some of the general concerns or the general views are on social media. Eugene talks about remembering those who lost their battle to AIDS and those who are still in the fight. Hashtag World AIDS Day, of course. Vaka Gavas talks about AIDS is not subjective to one's sexuality. Yes, there are lots of myths around HIV/AIDS. We want you to tell us. Mrs. Mbacha talks about most couples don't get tested because they're worried that their partner would think they are cheating. Get tested. Hashtag World AIDS Day. Yes, testing is there's still a lot of concerns around it. Natalie talks about on World AIDS Day, thinking especially of all those I met in Masham Hospital, Tanzania, in their wonderful clinic there. Keep it coming. We've got a question. What are the myths? What are the myths that you come across when we discuss HIV/AIDS, not just in South Africa but globally? Now, today's picture of the day. Let's take a look at that picture of the day. It's a wonderful human chain. There you see the AIDS ribbon. Young people. Yes, young people are most at risk. And of course, our topic today, we're dealing with World AIDS Day. Survivors talk about being infected and fighting HIV. Let's take a quick look at what is happening around the globe. We start in Europe, where the Times reports that Britain is ready to start striking the headquarters of Islamic State within 48 hours after David Cameron announced a vote on extending the military campaign into Syria. Then, in New York, the International New York Times reports that ahead of the climate change negotiations in Paris, the Chinese government has released its latest scientific assessment of how global warming has affected and is likely to affect China. Then, in China itself, the South China Morning Post says the International Monetary Fund has approved the inclusion of the yuan amongst its special drawing rights currencies at a board meeting in Washington. A move analysts say will put the currency under pressure to weaken somewhat. It's World AIDS Day. We will continue looking at the issues affecting many of our compatriots here in South and Southern Africa. Don't go away.
Oh, hi. Just brushing up on my party. We are going to make it number 12. Official. Let me teach you a quick word.
Yeah.
Quite a star. A woman who has mastered the art of dancing in high heels. It's up and flip.
Get a bottle of Glenfiddich 12-year-old with 2 glasses for only $3.99.99 and help make party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spa. Shake things up.
I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Babakini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Your destiny is not determined by the township you come from.
The one place we will find movers and shakers is in the township. It's just that they're diamonds in the rough and some of them don't even know it.
Being young with no experience in business is a challenge that Bulelani took upon himself.
I was motivated by the prayer. I was motivated by the love.
To be a novice in business was tough, but experience made him a businessman of note.
It took me 7 years to make my first million. I've got all the scars to prove that I started with nothing.
A journey well traveled.
For me, that is the one major thing. The ability to touch other people's lives. Nothing goes beyond that.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bopilong every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
Now, today is World AIDS Day, as we all know, and when the world stops to take stock of the fight against the human immunodeficiency or HIV epidemic that began in the 1980s, and for which no cure has yet been found. Now, along with the activist NGO Treatment Action Campaign, the TAC, the International Medical Humanitarian NGO, Doctors Without Borders has been at the forefront of providing affordable ARVs to HIV-positive South Africans since the early 2000s. Now today, they are officially launching their #LifeBeyondHIV Khayelitsha mural project. 2 giant mural paintings can be seen on the side of OR Tambo Hall, the largest, most well-known building in Khayelitsha. Joining us now from Cape Town studio is the outgoing project coordinator of Doctors Without Borders in Khayelitsha, Lynn Wilkinson, as well as the treatment literacy trainer for the Treatment Action Campaign, Andile Madondile. A very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Now, Lynn,
good morning.
Lynn, let's start off with you. UNAIDS, the global UN body for HIV/AIDS, recently announced their new strategy of 90-90-90. Can you please explain to us what this actually means?
Yes, of course. It means that we want to make sure that 90% of people that are HIV positive are tested so that they know their status. And then we want 90% of those people put onto ARV treatment. And the last 90 is to make sure that the 90% that are on treatment are taking their treatment properly every single day of their lives so that their virus is suppressed.
Now, Lynn, South Africa has 6.8 million people, over 10% of our population living with HIV, but only half of those are currently on treatment. And every year, another 330,000 new infections, mainly young women between the ages of 15 and 30 years old. That's the highest number of new infections in the world. Realistically speaking, how does a country like us in South Africa achieve the UNAIDS 90-90-90 targets?
It's a good question and probably $1 million question. But really for us, it's possible, but it will require a lot of hard work and a change in strategy. Essentially, we need to be able to move out of our clinic systems into our communities. We need to make sure that if we're going to test 90% of people who are HIV positive, we can't be relying on people to go into their clinic and sit there for half a day to get an HIV test, or stumble upon a random HIV outreach testing in your community. We need to make sure that testing is available for all of us at every corner so that we can all test regularly, at least once every 6 months, so that we know our status. We also need to make sure that we get the message out there to our communities that once you test positive, you need to start treatment immediately and quickly, and not to stay at home waiting for the disease to wreak havoc in our bodies. We need to make sure that we get on treatment as quickly as possible. But that also means that there's a demand on our health system to be able to put people on treatment quickly and not require people to come back repeatedly to clinics without starting them on treatment. And then the last one, that is really probably the most essential, is how are we going to keep people on treatment for life? And that means, number one, we need to make sure that our clinics and our hospitals have a reliable drug supply. At the moment, we don't have that right in South Africa. We cannot rely on the fact that in every single province in this country, we have ARV treatment in every single clinic. That's our number one priority.
No, it's all good and well.
Our second priority is just to make sure that it's simple for people to stay on treatment.
Yes. Now, Lynn, it's all good and well to have the treatment. My grandmother used to say prevention is better than cure, and the biggest increase in HIV infections is among the youth. In a society that has a significant amount of education on HIV and AIDS in schools and elsewhere, why do you think are we seeing this behavior that people are not adhering?
Well, it's not easy to adhere, and I think that's the critical point. We're trying to continue our lives, and for our young people, that means going to school, creating a livelihood. And if we expect people to get their ARV supply every month or every 2 months by sitting in a clinic for half a day, it's not at all surprising that life intervenes and we start making decisions which might mean that we don't keep fetching that ARV supply. So until we can start making sure that people are able to receive their ARV treatment at a quick pickup point in their communities, it's going to be incredibly difficult to, especially for our young people, to stay on treatment for their entire lives.
Now, Andile, you have been living openly with HIV since 2006. As of 2008. Can you tell us how this impacted on your life, not only on a personal level, but also with regards to the work that you have chosen to do for the Treatment Action Campaign in getting communities to understand how HIV actually works and how people can then continue to live productive lives despite having the virus in their blood?
Okay, yeah, point of correction. I started to live with HIV since 2004. Since 2004, yes. Ever since I was diagnosed with HIV in 2004. Yeah, it was very difficult, but because of the help of education that was happening in our community clinics, like Kailicha, where I'm coming from, you know, the educators from Treatment Action Campaign, you know, they were doing such a good job, you know, to mobilize us from the community and then to educate about HIV and AIDS. How does the HIV replicate itself inside the immune system? It really played a vital role. And now I became involved with the campaigns that are taking place within the community and doing the trainings for organization, for TAC inside and different organization outside, even the lawyers, the nurses, and everyone. I'm training them now according to the new treatment that we are having in South Africa.
And what is that new treatment?
The new treatment is it's a one pill specifically, not only that one. We are talking about different topics that we are talking at them, opportunistic infections, and also the one pill that we are having in South Africa.
Now, you are also involved in an exciting new campaign facilitated by Doctors Without Borders and the TAC, the hashtag Life Beyond HIV campaign. Share with us the details of this project and how it came about.
Okay, yeah, you know, we were part of that Life Beyond beyond HIV, you know, because mostly, if I can tell you, is that the people living with HIV and AIDS, tech, you know, they were involved, artists, they were involved. We're sitting down together and give them the ideas, especially the artists, to go back and they will come back to us and show us, you know, we are here. Even the messages that we have there in that mural painting that is going to be unveiled today is come to us, you know. Even the pictures that you see in the mural painting there is the people from Kailicha that are living openly with HIV and AIDS. The main purpose of the thing was just to educate. If you recall, in the past years, we're doing activities activities about HIV and AIDS, but we needed something that is going to stay long and, you know, for the period of 5 years to 6 years, and then that will encourage other people, you know, to test for HIV and to take treatment, those who are on treatment.
Now, today, Lynn, you in Kailicha, tell us about what is happening there today.
So today we're unveiling the murals, which the community, as Andile said, took part in creating the images, and we're unveiling that today. And we hope that the large murals that will tower above Khayelitsha will be a constant reminder to us and our communities that we haven't beaten HIV yet, and we still have a way to go. We need to go in, we need to test, and we need to start treatment. And we need our communities to support those that are HIV positive, because it's not easy to stay on treatment. And we need the love and support of our families, our friends, and our communities to stay on treatment.
Thank you to both of you. That was Lynn Wilkinson, the project coordinator of Doctors Without Borders. She's the outgoing project coordinator, as well as the treatment literacy trainer for the Treatment Action Campaign, Andile Madondile, joining us in our Cape Town studios. But now it's over to you, Evan.
Yeah, thanks, Elvis. We continue our look on World AIDS Day, and specifically now the I'm a Survivor campaign. IMAS is one of the campaigns that's fighting the disease. The campaign has taken a little different approach as it plans to educate the public on their personal risk perception, to drive testing, to reimagine and innovate a new and effective model of support. Also, the I'm a Survivor campaign is building a team of dynamic ambassadors, some of whom are positive and tell their stories in powerful new ways. Others are celebrities that are willing to use their status to spread the message. Now, I'm joined this morning by the CEO of Diamond Life Impact Projects, Jake Scott. Very good morning to you, Jake. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the campaign. What makes you guys different?
Well, I'll tell you what's different. You know, all of the reports we've heard this morning, HIV is at crisis levels. The infection, we've made a lot of progress as a nation in South Africa, but the one area where we haven't made a lot of progress is in the infection rate. Still more than 1,300 people every day are becoming infected. The statistic for young women, 15 to 24, is that the estimates are 2,300 every week are becoming infected. This is untenable. So in order to change the trajectory of the epidemic, we must reach young people, and we must seed a new, healthy social dynamic among young people. And so when we look at the situation, we say, okay, with these numbers that are piling on every day, we need to have a plan. This is an environment that's full of a threat, and so we must change our mentality to become survivors. It's very difficult in South Africa because of the level of stigma, to discuss HIV. Young people aren't talking about HIV, and if we can't talk about HIV, then we won't be prepared for it when we're in this situation.
Is this where the new kind of message comes in, where the hero principle, you bring celebrities and so forth to get young people to understand that you can be 15 and be a survivor?
Absolutely. Well, our campaign is targeted to all South Africans to adopt a survivor mentality. The difference is if we look at who influences our youth culture. Yeah. If you look at celebrities, you look at the music business, you look at entertainment, these are the people that have the most impact on youth culture. And so we need to engage that entertainment factor to spread the message. Now, the way we've laid out the campaign is that we want to do free to the public musical concerts featuring big names. Now, we're still raising the money to do this, but at the heart of our campaign is a song called I'm a Survivor. It was done by a wonderful artist and composer named Valley. It was just showcased on the SABC Big Up show, along with our ambassador, Portia Wainey. And she tells a very compelling story. So when we take entertainment events into different areas, young people, we want to create events that young people crave to be a part of. And if you can do that from that platform, you can then educate.
We understand that young people are most at risk, and that's where the crisis is at here in South Africa. How have they responded to the work that you are doing?
No, young people love entertainment, and so whenever you do an event that has entertainment or you give content that's exciting for them, they do it. Another real key component to fighting this disease is to make sure that there is effective support for people once they are infected. But people should have a plan, whether you're infected or affected, or you're negative or you're positive. People should know how to stay healthy and how to protect your health. We've got a 4-step plan. If you're negative, everybody must take the test and know their status. But if you're negative, you must always protect yourself. Use condoms, you know, try monogamy. Test together if you're in a relationship, and just never take chances.
Going forward, what's the next step for the campaign? What would you like to see in the short and medium term?
Short term, we have just launched the song, and so we're trying to get as much exposure for the song as possible. And the music video. So we're trying to achieve high visibility for the campaign. Long term, we want to carry this message around the country to young people through events, through media, and through our website, which is imasurvivor.coza.
Fantastic, Jake. Guys, doing fantastic work. Thank you for joining us this morning. Jake Scott is the CEO of Diamond Life Impact Project's I'm a Survivor campaign. Look out for the track, I'm a Survivor, as well. It's launched already today, of course. It's World AIDS Day. We continue with your views on HIV/AIDS. Of course, our question today, we ask you, what are some of the myths you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? You know, there are lots of different myths that are doing the rounds. We'd like to hear what are some of the ones that you continue to hear that's not going away. Let's also now look at the comments that you guys have been putting forward so far. Design Orc says, be safe, use PrEP, get tested. Megs, people will be missed and always remembered. World AIDS Day today. Hashtag love. Yes, Megs, that's kind of the right spirit of today. Emblem of Christ talks about prevention is only as successful as your faithfulness in a relationship. Hashtag World AIDS Day. Then Makwenja talks about a child is an innocent being, especially an unborn one. It breaks my heart to see a child born infected in 2015. There you go. This is what it's about today, World AIDS Day. The time to act is now. That is the theme of today. Now, let's take a look at what's happening around the country today. Here in Johannesburg, of course, it's the third AfriCities Summit at the Sandton City Convention Centre. The focus of the summit today will be on host cities across the continent and how they deal with HIV/AIDS. UNAIDS and the UN Habitat will release a report on HIV/AIDS on the continent as well. Then in Cape Town, the leader of the official opposition in the Western Cape Legislature, Marius Fransman, is expected to move a motion of impeachment against Premier Helen Zille. If it happens, Zille will be the first Premier in the history of the democratic South Africa to face such a motion of impeachment. The ANC is expected to table the motion that will be debated in the House later today. However, the ANC needs to convince 2/3, that's 28 members, for this motion to be passed. Now, let's move on and take a look at what's happening on Newsroom's Facebook page today. We see there that the World Health Organization has reiterated that expanding access to antiretroviral treatment to everyone living with HIV/AIDS is key to ending the pandemic within a generation. Then, the world's leaders are attending a long-planned climate summit in Paris just weeks after 130 people were gunned down by Islamic State militants in the French capital. Addressing the coincidental convergence of global warming and terrorism is unavoidable. We also see that hundreds marched to several slave memorial sites in the city of Cape Town last night as the city commemorates the promulgation of the November 1834 Act to end slavery. All of those stories and a whole lot more right here on Newsroom's Facebook page.
Show host and was diagnosed HIV positive 14 years ago. Griselda Dudumashe, as you know her, Kananda, is a dynamic woman, a mother, a professional, inspirational, motivational speaker, as well as counselor, a former nurse and medical underwriter. She has worked with different government departments, as well as the corporate sector, on implementing workplace programs nationally and internationally. Griselda has been living positively and openly with HIV, and she now joins us in studio. Very good morning to you, Griselda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I actually have to correct that. It's 17 years now.
17?
Yeah.
That's even a longer time.
Yeah.
Now, World AIDS Day, we're celebrating that today.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
For me, it actually says we need to get the wording right, that we can't even be calling it a celebration when we've lost millions of people, lost them to a tiny, so pathetically smaller virus that from the beginning, when we introduced it, we should have stuck to the brief. Scientists said it's a viral infection that causes immune deficiency. We came up with different phrases, war metaphors. It's a time bomb. It's catastrophic. It's a ugaulayo, pamukati. I mean, so many words that have nothing to do with a viral infection that causes immune deficiency. And because of that, many people were lost in the translation. And for me, it becomes an opportunity every year that we go back and reflect, look at what we've done wrong, because, I mean, it doesn't matter how well and accurately you follow the directions. If your first 10 was wrong, you'll never reach your destination.
So what you are suggesting is that the narrative should change?
The narrative should change. We need to go back to the basics. What was it about? It was a viral infection that causes immune deficiency, and our response to it was more on sexual transmission only. It was more on commercializing the responses to HIV. What do I mean by that? Today, the only symbol that is associated with HIV are just ribbons and condoms. And when we talk about comprehensive care, we talk treatment, we talk care and support. We've never unpacked the care and support. What does it mean? We know so much about the treatment part, that you take antiretrovirals at a certain point in your life. But what does care and support entail? And are we fully resourced as a country, as the world, in responding to managing HIV in our society? I mean, everybody today gets shocked. Why are people not using condoms? We haven't asked them. Because if we were to pay attention and ask them, we would know that there's a segment of people who are responding negatively to using condoms. We haven't taught them about lubrication. There are people, when they use condoms, they get hurt. We haven't had those conversations. There are people who are allergic to the latex. We haven't had those conversations. It's all about, you know, just the one size fits all. As I say, you do. And unfortunately, the as I say, you do, the many sayers don't do themselves.
But HIV affects the entire family. How did your family react when you first told them about your infection?
I think one of the things that I'm so grateful about, when I started talking about my personal story, it was never from a point of, let's come and have a disclosure ceremony now that Criselda has HIV, I've got something to share. But it was more from coming from a nursing background, looking at my environment and seeing how I struggled to make sense out of a viral infection that at the time was said to be affecting people who are promiscuous, people who make wrong decisions about their health and well-being. And there I was not fitting in the category of the description of HIV and having to deal with it. What did that mean to me? And what it meant is read, ask questions, learn as much as you can. And in my talking about it, it was never to seek reaction from other people, because that can always deter you. I can't control what you say about me when I tell you about my HIV status. All I can control is how I respond to what you say about me. So it was never from a point of, you know, seeking sympathy, but it was more about there's so much power in knowledge. I know something, and therefore I'm sharing the something. And family was very supportive.
World AIDS Day today, once again, but what advice can you give to people out there living with the virus?
I think governments have done so much. Companies have done so much. So much money has been spent. We have so many resources throughout the world. It's time for us to start personalizing the risk of infection. That what does it mean to me as an individual? When I say World AIDS Day, I mean, even the notion of us talking about looking forward to an AIDS-free generation in 2030, how do we get there when we haven't even defined what AIDS is? AIDS are diseases that are treatable and curable, but because we've labeled them with a stigma of a viral infection that's sexually transmitted, once again, we're lost in the translation. So let's go back to those basics and understand the meaning for me as an individual.
Criselda, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
That was Criselda Dudu-Marche in studio with us.
is this? I was born to win, lived a life of sin, filled with darkness and pain. I couldn't see the sun. Wonder why is this? He gave his life up for me so I can be a queen. I grew up in a life of shame. Mom and dad never had a name. The father I knew stole my innocence, left me with the seed brought by lust, and now my body is my definition of hate, of shame. The baby was born too late. Innocence taken from me, I gave it the blame. Forced to become a woman at an early age, I wish I also knew how to play. The only playtime I knew was in between the sheets, where I was always the mouse being chased. Dirty hands, those evil stares, I was a slave to these men. Puberty must have hit me at birth, I swear. I knew the meaning of pain the minute my unknown mother gave her last push. Pushing me away from her breast, not even one suckle from that love, but she didn't care. And all the time growing up, I asked her, where could I find her? How I wish someone would care about my truth. Heartless as I am, I still wish, still dream. However blinded is my vision, I still can see clearly into my past, my scars, my truth.
Well, that was a poem looking at World AIDS Day, brought to you by the Nubian Queen here on Newsroom. That beautiful poem about a woman's plight on this World AIDS Day. Time now for us to take a look at the weather with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, let's take a look at your weather. We're going to start off as usual by taking a look at Southern Africa. Now, this is what's going on in terms of your rainfall at the moment. What we're expecting is a little bit of rainfall to begin in South Africa's northeastern areas. Now, it is only light rainfall, so really shouldn't affect your day too badly. We are expecting partly cloudy skies brought in by low pressure systems just passing by South Africa's southern coastline. Now, as we move through tonight and, of course, into tomorrow morning, we're expecting the intensification and then residual rainfall of course, those rains that are now extending all the way throughout South Africa's western interior towards that central interior and now towards the eastern coastline as well. Affects the southwestern parts of Botswana as well as the far eastern parts of Namibia as well. So good news for these areas, definitely needing some rainfall. But let's take a look at what's going on in terms of your temperatures for today. You can see some very, very warm temperatures there. Gaborone peaks at 36 degrees, as does Pretoria. It's going to be an absolute scorcher there in Uppington, 42-degree maximums. You can see isolated showers forecast for the areas as well, but none as intense as we're expecting over the central regions of the Congo and the surrounding areas. Of course, the Central African Republic also expecting some rainfall. We're expecting that rainfall all the way throughout the central regions of Africa for today. Into tomorrow, very, very similar conditions. We do see that residing just a little bit towards the northern interior there. We are going to see it intensifying as well in these areas towards that central interior. Of course, the coastal regions not quite expecting as much rainfall. Let's see in terms of your temperatures what's going on for today. Brazzaville peaks at 31 degrees. The whole Congo expecting a nice warm day there. Lots of cloud cover expected in the area though. Yaoundé is at 29 degrees up north, as is Bangui, 37-degree maximums for a warm day there. Now towards the northeastern parts of Africa, of course, we're expecting only a little bit of rainfall there towards Cairo and the surrounding areas. The northern coastline there getting a little bit of rainfall. Now that is the result of, again, lower pressure systems which are bringing in cooler temperatures as well. So don't expect a particularly warm day there. Port Sudan might even get a little bit into tomorrow, and that extends towards Baghdad and towards the Middle East as well. In terms of your temperatures, as I said, a little bit of a cooler day in some areas. Benghazi at only 18 degrees. It is going to be a little bit of a cooler one as we take a look towards Tripoli, a 17-degree maximum. And, of course, Baghdad at only a 15-degree high for this afternoon. Now, taking a look towards the western areas of Africa, we are seeing a little bit of rainfall along that southern coastline. Abidjan peaks nice and warm. They will get those temperatures in a minute, but we are expecting that to bring in some rainfall. The same systems moving towards Lagos as we move through the day into tonight and, of course, into tomorrow, expecting that rainfall to intensify and indeed penetrate a little bit further into the interior there. We are seeing that now extending throughout the entire southern coastline of West Africa. Very quickly into your temperatures. As I said, expecting a warm day in Abidjan there, a 30-degree maximum forecast for you. Lagos, a little bit warmer there at 32. This is where I'm going to leave your weather for now. Do stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you very much to Phil Hawkins. Phil will be back a little bit later with another update. Of course, we're asking you today a question. What are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? Of course, today is World AIDS Day. Our entire program has been devoted thus far to World AIDS Day. Send us your comments, your tweets at SABC Newsroom. We'd love to hear what you think, especially those myths. Some of them are just unbelievable. We'll look at that a little bit later in the show. Don't go away. We'll be back at the top of the hour with a complete news update with our Vice President and Kendall Mahamati. See you then.
Health Talk looks into the increase of suicide and symptoms leading to suicide.
The death wish grows when you go into depression after a lot of stress.
And often when we talk about suicide, we don't talk about a person wanting to stop living, but rather wanting to stop living in pain.
After losing everything in life that lead you to no options but suicide.
I had that spirit of fear in me to say, don't even face tomorrow.
After being overwhelmed with stress and trauma, it becomes difficult to have self-control.
People learning tools and skills that will practically enable them to meet these challenges.
In trying times, never be alone. Reach out for help to a better solution.
Support should be done by a counsellor or psychologist where you're able to speak about how you're feeling in a safe, accepting, non-judgmental space.
For all your health tips, join Dr. Silo Mutawuni every Saturday from 9 till 10.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 1st of December 2015, as we commemorate World AIDS Day. This is Newsroom. A very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. The world unites in the fight against stigma, discrimination and HIV as it commemorates World AIDS Day. At the COP21 in Paris, President Jacob Zuma tells world leaders that developed nations have an obligation to help developing countries. And the Supreme Court of Appeal is finalizing a decision on whether to send Oscar Pistorius back to prison. Now, those are all your headlines, but first, before we go to our top story, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Quite a lot happening out in boardrooms as opposed to on the sports front in the sports field itself. But let me also greet our viewers at home. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Athletics Kenya president and vice president among 3 Kenyan officials suspended by the IAAF for subverting anti-doping laws. This says Messi and Neymar wonder why Luis Suarez is not shortlisted for the Ballon d'Or and insist that he should have been. And defending champions, the Blitzbokke, have arrived in Dubai for the HSBC 7th Series season opener. And that's exactly what we've got for you in the sports. Make sure you stick around for that about 10:20 or so. And back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's now go to our top story this morning. It's World AIDS Day today. To mark it, the World Health Organization and the Joint UN Programme on HIV/AIDS have called for antiretroviral therapies to be made available to all people living with the virus. This will be key to ending the epidemic by 2030.
Despite major strides in combating the spread of HIV, AIDS is the leading cause of death among African teenagers and the second most common killer globally.
I talked about adolescent deaths tripling since 2000. That translates to 26 infections every hour. It's the top cause of death for 15 to 19-year-olds in Africa, the second largest cause of death for adolescents globally. I have 7 out of 10 of those infections are girls, so girls way disproportionately affected other than boys. And half of these are in just 6 countries, and so targeting those 6 countries is crucially important.
Those 6 countries are South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania and India, as the drive to close the gap between those infected and those on ARV treatment intensifies.
There's 21 million who need treatment today who don't get it, and around 19 million of those don't know their status. So there has to be a huge effort on testing. We, as part of our strategy, have launched a target of 90-90-90, where by 2020 we want to get 90% of people infected with HIV tested so that they know their status.
UNAIDS estimating that by 2020 they will require $31 billion annually to break the trajectory of the virus. And despite broad availability of diagnostic testing globally, only half the people with HIV around the world know that they are carriers, thus closing the gap between knowing one's status and getting treatment remains among the biggest challenges in stopping the spread of HIV within the next 15 years. Sherwin Bryce-Speeds, SABC News, New York.
Now, South Africa has made significant strides in the fight against HIV/AIDS in the past couple of years. However, with an increase of new infections among young women and girls in the country, the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, has urged South Africans to play their part in protecting what he says are vulnerable young girls.
You'll be aware that 14 countries in the East and Southern African region, between those 14 countries, every week there are 5,000 new infections of girls between the ages of 15 and 24. Very unfortunately, half of that is in one country, and that is South Africa. We don't really have one clear answer. We don't really have one clear answer. we believe it's a conglomeration of many factors that are coming together. One of them being, you know, the HIV/AIDS pandemic was devastating, especially to women. Many young girls are orphans. Their mothers have passed on. And so they are vulnerable to sugar daddies, you know, who promise them a better life, who promise them finances, etc. But then they don't really have mothers to guide. Many of them get out of school early. Many of them are having a problem of teenage pregnancy, which makes them vulnerable to this whole thing. Now, our conclusion is this, Ayanda. The successes you are talking about, if you look at them, are mostly on the biomedical side. That means our biomedical interventions have been hugely successful, like the issue of mother-to-child transmission, whereby only 10 years ago, 70,000 children were born HIV positive in South Africa. But because of the success of the prevention of mother-to-child transmission, the PMCTC program, now the figure is down to about 7,000, lower than 7,000. That's a dramatic drop, as you can see. So that's a biomedical intervention. But then the socio-behavioral intervention, that is the one that is a problem in the country. That means the interventions whereby you must change the social settings and the behavior of people. That is where Southern and Eastern African region of the continent is suffering from, and that's where South Africa is suffering from. That is why we launched the DREAM project 2 weeks ago with the ambassador of United States and the ambassador of PEPFAR, because they are funding that project to the tune of 800 million rand for 10 countries in the Southern and Eastern region to try and deal with this issue of young women. And we believe we were inviting society to rise up, act and protect those young people, especially men. In the DREAMS program, we want to target men because they are the ones who are causing this problem. There is no sugar daddy without a man. They are the ones who are taking advantage of these young girls, because we have got statistics that shows that in that age group, young girls are 4 times more likely to get HIV positive than young boys of the same age group. So who is infecting these young girls? It can't be the young boys, because the young boys are HIV/AIDS free at that age. It is the older men, and they are using their economic power and their patriarchal power and the power that societal power. So all those things need the whole society to think.
Meanwhile, the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, will speak to residents living in the Ugu district in KwaZulu-Natal near Port Shepstone today on World AIDS Day. And he will urge them to rise, to act, and to protect themselves and others from AIDS. Our reporter Blaine Herman is on the scene to give us an update. Blaine, a very good morning to you. And can you tell us what is happening there?
Yeah, very good morning, Elvis. Good morning, everybody. You're live from the Ugu Sports and Leisure Centre in Port Shepstone on the KwaZulu-Natal South Coast. It is indeed World AIDS Day 2015, and we're here actually to commemorate this important day, which I guess affords us an opportunity to unite in the fight against HIV, as well as show our support for the people that are living with this disease, as well as remember those that have died from this deadly virus. Now, this year's theme, as you've mentioned, is getting to zero towards an HIV-free generation, but that's the aim. But you know, Elvis, the task is huge. If you look at the numbers, there's estimates of about 37 million people worldwide that are living with HIV. Here in South Africa, the numbers range between 6.3 and 6.8 million people that are living with this disease. If you look at the numbers in terms of new infections per year, that number is sitting at around 350,000. That roughly works out to about 1,000 new infections per day. Now, that gives you a stark reminder of the magnitude of the problems that we're actually facing. And this mainly affects women between the ages of 15 and 24. Now, lots to be discussed here. I have a guest here who's actually working with people on the ground. She's actually from Limpopo, but she's doing a lot of work in terms of HIV and AIDS. Please, could you come forward? Your name, ma'am?
My name is Mashudu Mfomande.
Mm-hmm. And where are you from?
I'm from Limpopo.
Yeah. Just tell us, stigma is a big issue in South Africa in terms of HIV. What is the issues on the ground? How are people dealing with this?
Okay, last week we just have a prevention campaign, a prevention summit, where we spoke with different women. We had 150 guests, and stigma was one of the things which we had discussed. And still fresh in my mind, one of the things which people had said that at the time was that families are still not yet open for people to disclose their statuses in South Africa. So as much as the statistic is going high and in the rate which it is, we still have, on the other hand, people being unable to disclose their statuses to their families. Two, they mentioned the issue of stigma in healthcare facilities, where when they go there, they have different cards, they have there are different queues for them to access treatment, and then some said that they have outside containers where they get their treatment. So the facilities in themselves makes it very difficult for people to access treatment, because unless if you want everyone else already to know your status, because everyone else who's in that queue are known to be HIV positive. So that's still a bit of a barrier for people to access treatment, such that they want to access it in villages and townships where they don't know them.
So what do you think needs to be done now to eradicate this stigma, this prejudice?
Guess one is that we need to go back. You know, there was a time in South Africa where we were talking about HIV in everything that we do. In that way, we had managed to raise awareness at the time for people to be aware of HIV. And now that has simmered down, we don't do that anymore. And two is that healthcare facilities and policies need to be able to accommodate the issue of HIV still, and the privacy that it still deserves. So sometimes we really forget, and in the manner in which settings are done in hospitals, we might not even be aware that we are stigmatizing people by so doing. Yep. So that's one of the things that one of the resolution in the summit that we need to speak with the Department of Health in terms of raising that kind of awareness, that this is one of the things that people have raised as a concern.
Thank you very much. That's how this is the issues on the ground. This is what people are talking about on the ground. Stigma, a big issue. Prejudice, discrimination, a big issue. And that's what Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is likely to touch on when he addresses the crowd. And, he's also the chair of the South African National AIDS Council. So he'll be, reaffirming government's stance and commitment to overcome this global epidemic. Elvis.
Thank you so much for that report. That's our reporter, Blaine Herman, in the KwaZulu-Natal. Now, we're asking you that question today. He's talking about stigma, but we also know there's something called myths. And what are some of the myths, then, that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? That's our question to you. You can let us know what's on your mind on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter page. We'll read your comments during the course of the program. Now, as we all know, today is World AIDS Day. The whole world will today pause to look back on the progress that have been made on the war against HIV/AIDS. Our focus today is on the Treatment Action Campaign, which has been on the forefront of the war against the disease. Remember, the TAC is credited for forcing the government to begin making antiretroviral drugs available to South Africans many years ago. On World AIDS Day, we are joined in studio from the Gauteng Provincial by the Gauteng Provincial Coordinator, Stephen Ngobo, joining us here. Very good morning to you, Stephen, and welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
Now, World AIDS Day, what does it mean for the TAC, the Treatment Action Campaign?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think I will take from what the report was saying, that the Deputy President, as the chairperson of the South African National AIDS Council, is going to Utungu or somewhere in KZN. And I think this is what TAC wants. It does not want big speeches. It does not want big events of millions being spent like it did in Mpumalanga. And soon after that, nothing happened in Mpumalanga. In fact, problems still remains. And TAC, what it wants a World AIDS Day where it does not just reflect on its successes, but also faces its challenges and engages the communities across. And it should not just end with the Deputy President, who's the chairperson of SANAC, but it should also translate to all the leaders at all levels, because what the Deputy President is doing could be done by another premier somewhere. But what about at the local? Are the mayors doing the same thing? Hopefully, yes. But what about the ward councillors? In my experience as a local activist, I never saw ward councillors doing this. So it says, as much as there is a sign of leadership at the national level, but there is still a lot that's lacking at the local level.
Now, according to the TAC, is South Africa winning the war against HIV/AIDS?
Definitely. I think we should commend what we all know, that many people are now on ARVs, and this automatically says people's lives are saved and people cannot easily infect others because they are suppressing the virus. However, it does not mean, or rather, let me say, the question would be, are these people, all of them, 3 million or so of them, always on treatment every day, all the time? When they go to the clinic across all the provinces, do they always get their treatment? Because if they don't get that treatment at that particular day and time, they go back. It might make them delay coming back again, taking treatment. And between the space of them not coming back and the time that they're going to have to come back again, what if they run out of treatment? And again, the fact that there's still a poor management in terms of supply chain of medication. These things are saying they may take back the gains that we're having as TAC in terms of access to treatment. Yeah.
Your achievements as the TAC thus far.
Yes.
What does it mean?
As TAC, yeah. As TAC, we have had many progressive campaigns. Recently, we were able to win the court, being friends with it, in terms of the minors that are infected with TB for many years, since the 1950s up until now. We have been able to mobilize a number of minors as well as unions to actually come to the forefront to address the matter. A lot of issues are coming up now, and the issues of mines are being addressed, but also the issue of prison. As much as the minister is now talking about it, but previously the issue of prisoners not being attended to was not being addressed. But recently the minister is now having a focus. I think that is part of what TAC contributed, and the fact that we're having this kind of treatment rollout that is bigger across Africa.
Your work is very important,
yes.
And but the way forward now for the TAC, especially in this challenging times, because we believe that at one stage the TAC was bankrupt.
Yes, yeah. Recently, the General Secretary Anela Yawa of TAC sent a communication to all TAC provinces and leadership to say they are working on the TAC 3-year strategic plan, which is going to also consult with the provinces that are going to also put in things, but also continuing to mobilize resources to ensure that TAC remains vigilant.
Today is World AIDS Day. What have you got that you are doing towards this day?
Yes. For example, let me speak about Gauteng. Our comrades, for example, in KZN, as one of them was raising issues on the ground, they are there to ensure that whatever happens in Durban, they raise issues and the voice from the ground. But also as TAC in Gauteng, we are going to different areas across the province to raise concerns about different clinics or hospitals. And we're doing this so that we draw the attention of different MECs, but in this case, our health MEC in Gauteng, Ketan Mahlang. Yes.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, that was the Gauteng Provincial Coordinator, Stephen Ngobo, from the Treatment Action Campaign, joining us here, telling us what they are currently doing. What are you doing? Remember, there's a question that we posed to you. There's a lot of myths out there about the HIV virus. And what are some of the myths that you heard? We would like to hear from you. There's the question on your screen today. What are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? Let's now move on. The case of Charlie Sheen, remember him, the actor? That has brought the criminalization of transmission debate into the spotlight again. This after the 50-year-old actor disclosed that he had been living with HIV for years. 6 of his former sexual partners have threatened to take legal action against him, saying they were never told of his diagnosis. Now, if they are successful in a lawsuit, they will join at least 5 people in the state of California who have used HIV disclosure laws, which is legal in 35 states and U.S. territories. Now, to tell us more about HIV transmission and criminal law in South Africa, we're joined via Skype by Dr. Johanna Keller, who is the National Executive Director of the AIDS Legal Network. Johanna, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning and thank you.
Now, Doctor, do we have such a law here in South Africa?
No, we don't. We have South Africa is not criminalizing the transmission and or exposure of HIV, which we need to remember, especially in times like these, where the discussion around HIV criminalization is coming up again.
Why is that the case?
Because from a human rights framework and from a human rights response, we are very strong and committed to the criminalization of HIV exposure and transmission doesn't really fit into a human rights-based response to HIV for various reasons.
Now, victims in South Africa, what can they do if they find themselves deliberately exposed to the virus?
I think we need to put the question into a bit more into perspective, because we live, especially in South Africa, we live in a context where we have high rates of people living with HIV. We have high rates of people who not even knowing yet that we're living with HIV. That's why the constant call for increased access to HIV testing, etc. So it's really, I think, what needs to happen is the realization that it's a common responsibility. You cannot rely that your partner is disclosing his HIV positive status for reasons of stigma and discrimination, for reasons of fear of what's going to happen, or even in cases that the person does not know of their HIV status. And if we would criminalize HIV exposure and transmission in such a context, then we will we put extra barriers to access to treatment, to access to HIV testing, and we actually make it very, very difficult to ensure that people who live with HIV would access testing, would access treatment, and the 90-90-90 is then becoming a reality of the far future.
Now, Doctor, if we don't have a law like that in place in South Africa, which other laws or current laws that we have must be amended or should be amended to allow for criminal conviction of non-disclosure of one's status to one's partner?
I do not agree that we need to have criminal laws for non-disclosure, because that, as I already said, would increase not only, as it would decrease access to treatment out of fear that I then, knowing that I am living with HIV, become potentially legal liable for a lawsuit. But also we must not forget the situation that due to societal context, women are the ones first to know of their HIV positive status. The women will be the one most affected by these kinds of laws, while women at the same time have the least access to legal services as and when they might potentially get sued. And I also think non-disclosure, we must remember that based on our constitutional and legal framework, is a matter of individual choice.
So what is the answer then, Doctor, to this dilemma?
I think the answer is that we have to be more vigilant when it comes to HIV prevention. We have to be more vigilant when it comes to the realization that I am responsible to protect myself and not rely on my partner's disclosure for my own decision whether or not I am engaging in protected sex.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Johanna Keller, the National Executive Director of the AIDS Legal Network, on the line. And that's where we got to leave it for now. Kendall Makamate standing by on the other side with your sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and a very good morning to you all at home. Now, our top story in this sports bulletin is 3 leading Kenyan athletics officials have been suspended by the Ethics Commission of Athletics governing body, the IAAF, over the potential subversion of the anti-doping control process in the African country. The latest casualties in the IAAF doping scandal, Athletics Kenya President Isaiah Kiplagat, Vice President David Okeo, and 2015 World Championships team leader Joseph Kinua have been suspended for 180 days in the interest of the integrity of the sport. The trio also face accusations that they were involved in the potential improper diversion from Athletics Kenya of funds received from Nike. This for having allegedly made personal withdrawals from sponsorship funds. The IAAF also said a prima facie case had also been found to exist in respect of Mr. Kiplagat in relation to receipt of 2 motor vehicles from the Qatar Athletics Federation in 2014 and 2015. And Argentina captain Lionel Messi and Portugal skipper Cristiano Ronaldo will go head-to-head once again for the title of world's best footballer after being shortlisted along with Neymar yesterday. The Ballon d'Or has effectively become an annual private Clásico between 2 of the greatest players of all time.
For the 7th time in 8 years, Barcelona's Messi and Real Madrid's Ronaldo are expected to fill the top 2 places on the podium in Zurich in January for the coveted accolade of being the year's leading player.
Rolled in by Messi.
The Argentine, who will be on the podium for an amazing 9th successive year, won 4 times in a row, between 2009 and 2012. Portugal's Ronaldo, on the other hand, has won 3 times, once when he was at Manchester United in 2008 and the most recent 2 editions at Real Madrid.
The truth is, I'm happy again for being in the top 3 finalists, happy for being in the new gala, and above all for being with Neymar the way I am. I would like Suarez to be here because he deserved it after the year he had. But anyway, I'm not going to take the credit away from Cristiano Ronaldo because he too also deserved it. We are going to enjoy it as we do every time.
The Ballon d'Or winner will be announced at a ceremony in Zurich on the 11th of January. Meanwhile, Barcelona took center stage last night, claiming 5 La Liga awards for the 2014-2015 season, while arch rivals Real Madrid went away with 3 trophies. Messi won the Best Player and the Best Striker awards. Brazilian Neymar was awarded Best Player from the Americas, beating Uruguayan striker Luis Suarez and Colombian midfielder James Rodriguez.
They were nominated because they worked well. Barca can have more. I trust my team, but I'm very happy for the award. Very happy for Messi and bravo.
The Best Coach award was won by Barcelona's Luis Enrique, who won the treble during his first season coaching the team. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Bringing it a little closer to home, Eastern Province Rugby has been in the spotlight of late. Allegations of mismanagement of funds and failure to pay players. This with the Super Rugby season a few months away. The Rugby Transformation Coalition says Eastern Province clubs stand firm in that King's president Cheeky Watson and his executive must account so that rugby in the Eastern Cape can be cleaned up. Now, SABC's Dumila Mateza spoke to Thabiso Sithole last night.
I think it is important for SARU to look at the governance aspects, that we pointed out, Nobandwini. The governance aspects are very clear. You cannot run an amateur setup and a professional setup. They will need to make sure, if they are going to put money into the EP Kings, they need to make sure the people who are there running the franchise are astute when it comes to business. They know what they are doing. They can go out and find sponsorship. You cannot tell me with the amount of industry that is in that part of the world, they could not raise sponsorship. Yeah. That is beyond me. I think you should ask for more than just accountability. You should ask for what is the plan going forward. I think there's another question. There are many people that we know of who can run that franchise as managers, as business people. Where it happened, I don't hear the name of Zolaya being mentioned.
And he's just recently retired from a permanent job.
He's just recently retired from the SABC, so he's available. Probably we should look at those kind of people to run the franchise separate from the Eastern Province Rugby Union, so that you have this clear divide. This is a business, this is an amateur setup.
And tonight, South Africa's men's under-23 side take to the field against their Zambian counterparts in their second match of the CAF Under-23 African Cup of Nations tournament. At stake more than continental glory, but also qualification for the Rio 2016 Olympics, which will go to the top 3 teams from this tournament. Now, the team will be without defender Denwin Farmer, who was stretchered off in the 3-1 loss to Senegal after a clash of heads. Meanwhile, the Orlando Pirates duo of Gift Mutupa and Menzima Suku are expected to bolster South Africa's chances. The match will kick off at 5 p.m. South African time. That will then be followed by the leaders of this group, Tunisia and hosts Senegal, at 8 p.m. South African time. And in tragic news that has just come through to us, former Athletics South Africa CEO and Secretary General of the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee boss, Banele Sindani, has been killed in Johannesburg. Sindani was shot once in the abdomen in a burglary at his home in Reemsig on the West Rand last night and died on the scene. He was 60 years old. And may his soul rest in peace. And that's where, unfortunately, we're going to have to end this news bulletin on that sad and tragic note. We'll be taking a short break. We'll be back with more news after that.
mind, it's Moneypenny. I've got your phone. Will you do me a favour next time? Go and pick it up yourself.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back. Because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. Time for us to shift our focus to news that is on the African continent right now. Roch Marc Kabore has been named the winner of the presidential election in Burkina Faso and will become the country's first new leader in decades. This after a year of turmoil that saw the West African country's former leader, Blaise Compaoré, deposed and the military trying to seize power in a coup there. Central African Republic's former president, Francois Bozize, has announced his candidacy for the country's December presidential election. Bozize was overthrown in a coup 2 years ago. The long-time leader was ousted by rebels from the Seleka force, which triggered the country's worst post-independence crisis. He currently lives in exile in an undisclosed location and faces an arrest warrant at home. Well, at least 25 people have been hacked to death in an overnight attack by Ugandan rebels in an eastern town of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The attack is blamed on the Allied Defense Forces. The United Nations General Secretary Ban Ki-moon has condemned these attacks and has called for the perpetrators to be brought to justice there. Also, Nigerian televangelist TB Joshua and his 2 contractors face possible arrest after they failed to appear in the Lagos High Court yesterday, prompting the judge to adjourn the case. The case follows a coroner's ruling in July that blamed Joshua's Synagogue Church of All Nations and 2 engineers for the 2014 tragedy that left more than 100 dead, of which 85 were South Africans. Now, the impact of the HIV/AIDS epidemic on the economy has been a concern since the start of the pandemic. Some believe that the HIV/AIDS epidemic is responsible for slowing the rate of economic growth of the gross domestic product of many heavily affected countries, and that in some cases GDP growth could decrease by more than 1% for every 10% HIV prevalence. Now, joining us in studio to talk about this is our political and economic analyst, Israel Mkhize. Very good morning to you, Israel. Thank you for being with us again.
Morning, Abin. Thank you for having me.
World AIDS Day, very often it's mentioned, but you can't always quantify the effect that the pandemic has had, economically speaking. How do you view it? How does HIV/AIDS affect the country's economy?
Right. Well, obviously, this very sensitive issue of HIV, it hits on the household. When you talk of household, you're talking about microeconomics. Talking about people who are income earners, and they obviously have to go to work. Now, if someone is sadly affected with the disease, obviously availability to the timeline of production within the work is going to, the routine is going to be affected by the whole medical checkups and so on, and that slows production in that particular time. Number 2, the pandemic obviously, because of the age factors that it's between 15 to 35 or even over that, it hits on the taxable population. Now, when you talk about the taxable population, you're talking about the working population, people who have to be taxed, whether through VAT or whichever way, so that the state expenditure or the state pest can be musculated. So when you've got a reduced workforce and a reduced employed people who are out of jobs because of having to be home to be cared for, then you've got the state having a reduced base of tax revenue, then that obviously affects on the GDP on the whole.
Now earlier I spoke to the UN and they said to me that 1 in 6 people living on the entire planet with HIV/AIDS are in South Africa. How big has the effect of the pandemic been on South Africa, do you think?
Well, it's been very huge. However, there's been very interesting reactions from some officials. I mean, if you take from the period of the Honorable President Nelson Mandela, who came out, I mean, to say, look, let's embrace, let's not fear, nor stigmatize on this question. Then came the following president, which was President Beg, who looked at it more from an economic eye. I mean, who then questioned the issues of the HIV coming out in open in such a robust way, with a question of demand and supply, with the pills and so on that needed to take care of our beloved people who are affected. And we remember the debate with the TAC that erupted with government. On one hand, the government was saying previously Africa had been hit as a dark continent, but now that most African countries have received their independence, they are now told they are a sick continent.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the statistics, it's amazing that only it's sub-Sahara Africa that will give you a red light on the maps.
Yeah.
And also, as far as I'm concerned, when you look at the UNAIDS stats, they show you that the sub-Sahara, I mean, North Africa, Africa towards the Mediterranean Sea, you even get a 1% projection of the spread of AIDS. But in the sub-Sahara down to Africa, I mean, you've got Zimbabwe, you've got Botswana, you've got Kenya, you've got South Africa, you've got Zambia, which are said to be leading on the pandemic. But when you look across sub-Sahara and Western Asian countries, are both countries, and when you look at their character, they've got the same characters in terms of their development outlook and trajectories, economically speaking. But you do not find much on the Arab and Europe, and certainly in the north of America. You don't find much projections on these 1 to whatever relation percentage is HIV. But the supply of the medication to take care of that huge percentage which is projected comes from these countries that show little percentage of being affected. So you have that politics of the economy of health supply and demand and supply, which then makes you to want to, obviously I'm not trying to politicize a very sensitive issue, but you then want to carefully look at these stats, that how do they create their hypotheses, what tools do they use really to pick up these issues.
When we look at infection, what are the economic factors that drive infection, or are they mostly cultural in nature? When we look at the places of the world that's battling hardest with the pandemic.
Well, there are many factors. You could factor in the cultural issues, like how we are, as a patriarchal society, look at women, you know, and the objectification of women as also sex objects, if you will, and how psychologically some men have argued that, actually some of the ladies have argued that if a man uses, for instance, a protection such as condom, it's got an inference that perhaps I'm not just straight, or there is someone else. But if we just use open sexual intercourse, there's an assumption that that's a very sanctified union, even outside marriage. So that, in a way, is a cultural problem. And also the economic issue, because sometimes you find that because of economic conditions, you find that we lower our sort of moral barcode, and we end up being in multiple relations, which is obviously unfortunate. But it's not limited to those two issues.
To wrap it up quickly, what do you think are some of the strategies that we need to implement to mitigate the negative impact of HIV/AIDS, specifically economically?
Well, I'll just use an example of what the president of Senegal said in the World Economic Forum. President Beg was there, Mr. Sekhwale was there. where he said the problem that is faced by developing countries is that while they've got the burden of infrastructure, the burden of technology, the burden of education, they also have to look after the welfare of their people. So one of the groups which I've seen using a very interesting strategy is a strategy called a save campaign, for instance, or you use the official the officials have been saying, like the abstinence and the use of protection. But I think each person has to somehow value their lives, and also the moment we destigmatize the AIDS problem, even those people who are affected, we embrace the whole society and no longer discriminate, even use people to sort of economically advance ourselves and taking advantage of their HIV status.
Well, Israel, thank you very much for joining us today. As always, every Tuesday, Israel Mkhize joins us in studio to talk about the issues around Africa's economy and the factors that affects it directly. Of course, it's World AIDS Day today. We spoke about that directly, the effect on African economies that the pandemic has had. Our question of the day deals directly with that. There are many myths, and of course, the disease is often stigmatized. What are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? If you share a glass of drinking water with somebody, for instance, you cannot contract the virus. These are just some of the myths that continue to do the rounds. We want to know what you've heard. Tell us at SABC Newsroom. Time now for us to move on. Say thank you to Israel for coming this morning, and time to move on and take a look at the front pages around the African continent today. We start in Swaziland. The Swaziland Observer reports that Deputy Minister Paul Dlamini has commended Mbane Motors for not just creating job opportunities for Swazis, but for also contributing significantly to the economic development of the country. Then we move to Nigeria, where the Vanguard says indications emerged yesterday that more heads may roll over the disappearance of $2 billion meant for the procurement of arms and ammunition for the country's armed forces in the office of the National Security Advisor under the country's last administration. Then we move to Namibia. The Namibian reports that the Bank of Namibia and the Banco Nacional de Angola have temporarily suspended the currency conversion agreement as from tomorrow. That's the 2nd of December 2015. Now we shift our focus to Nigeria. The Biafra struggle is as old as the Nigerian struggle, long before the actualization of Nigeria's independence in 1960. The ethnic group Igbos soon built a new nation as 14 million people opposed the rule of the North, but their fight for fair treatment has not been easy. Recently, pro-Biafra protests have been taking place, calling for the release of the detained director of Radio Biafra. Now, joining us in studio today is Nigerian journalist Solomon Izanga Shoms to talk about this. A very good morning to you, Solomon.
Morning.
Always nice to have you with us.
Good to be here.
It's been an almost age-old struggle, this. Why are we seeing this sudden rise in agitation, if one can call it that?
Well, as we know the history of Biafra itself, from 1967 to 1970, there was a civil war in Nigeria, the one and only civil war in Nigeria. Between 1 to 3 million people lost their lives, and all of that was to be able to create a republic, part of the eastern part of Nigeria and a little bit part of the southern part of Nigeria. It was led by a colonel in the Nigerian army called Emeka Ojukwu. He's British educated, and he succeeded in doing that. It was actually, the nation was recognized by countries like Gabon, Ivory Coast, even South Africa. Apartheid South Africa actually recognized it. But now we are beginning to see a different movement in a way that this time around we are seeing younger people, and we are seeing younger people saying we are going to make sure we have our own independence through a non-violent means. And especially with the recent history of Nigeria, in the late 1990s, we had the militants in the Niger Delta, with the same issue. And then we have Boko Haram currently going on with the same issue. The militants are from the south, and then we have Boko Haram from the north. This time around, we're talking about the eastern part of Nigeria. That is where the Biafra Republic is really pushing it, because they feel they've been really manipulated. They feel they've not been given leadership. They feel they've been they've been neglected when it comes to the sharing of infrastructures, the building of infrastructures across the country, the recognition of the Igbo people, and they feel, and rightly so, and I feel it's not just the Igbo people that have been neglected, but also, every part of Nigeria is just a leadership problem that we're beginning to see, panning out this way.
No, Igbo leaders have recently met with President Muhammadu Buhari. They've held discussions. What came out of this?
The Igbo leadership has a forum called Ohanezi, and they all come together, and they believe that they are the voice for the Igbo people, not just in Nigeria, but Igbo people in diaspora. And they had a meeting. They feel, they need to be able to intervene because we've seen protests in Onitsha, protests in Port Harcourt, protests in Aba, protests in Nnewi, and it's growing and gradually gaining momentum. And the police are actually going out and sometimes not really treating the protesters the way that it should be. Now, the leaders of the Igbo people now said, look, we need to push for the release of Kanu Nnamdi, the director of Radio Biafra, who was arrested in October. So that's what they're pushing for. And at the same time, they're not siding with the push for a republic. A lot of them are not doing that, but they're first pushing for the release of Kanu Nnamdi because he's been in detention for close to 2 months right now. He appeared in court last week. There was a lot of protest around the courtroom in Abuja. So they're pushing for that. And they're a voice that Igbo people really recognize. And it's good that they're really, getting up now and saying, look, we need to have... Let him have his day in court and also hopefully be able to release him. Then that way they're going to be able to deal with a whole lot of issues. He has to go to court because he's been charged with hate speech and also treason. So he needs to go and really defend himself because he has used Radio Biafra and quite a lot to push for the agenda and sometimes using words that we're not supposed to. And he's been to the UK and spoke to a lot of Igbo leaders around the world, advocating for armed struggle, advocating for mobilization of arms and weapons, just so they could attack and see how they could exclude themselves from Nigeria into a Biafra Republic.
Solomon, don't go away. Of course, you're dealing with World AIDS Day. Quickly, I can tell you, in Johannesburg at the Nelson Mandela Bridge, United Nations Under Secretary General and UN Women Executive Director Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka will release balloons to mark the end of 16 days of activism against all form of abuse at the beginning of World AIDS Day today. Mlambo-Ngcuka has called all people of the world to fight all forms of abuse and intensify the fight against HIV/AIDS. Let's go there.
The words of the city who are in partnership with us today, that gender-based violence and violence against women and girls has to end. It is not acceptable in our society. It is not inevitable. It has to be prevented everywhere where we are. And today we call on all the citizens of this city and the people of South Africa to participate in these 16 days as a way of encouraging more people to take a stand, more men to take a stand, more young people to take a stand, and to join in the fight to end violence against women and girls. Thank you so much for this opportunity to make this bridge orange so that it joins the other icon buildings and places of the world who are orange during these 16 days as a sign of generating a conversation about ending violence against women. The pyramids in Egypt are orange. Table Mountain is orange. The Panama Canal in Panama is orange. The City Hall of New York is orange. In Nairobi, we have also the state buildings are orange. The presidential palace in Brazil of the president is orange. Many parts of the world are having the same conversation as us. So we're part of the world as we do this. Thank you.
All right, the scissors.
Thank you. So help me cut. I need security. So, 3, 2, 1, hands.
Yeah, marking the end of the 16 days of activism campaign and the start or the beginning of World AIDS Day at the Nelson Mandela Bridge here in Johannesburg. That, of course, is the UN Women Executive Director, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, releasing balloons there this morning. Lots of festivities happening all around the country. But before we carry on with our World AIDS Day broadcast, let's wrap up what we've been discussing around with Solomon Izanga Shons. Solomon, just tell us quickly the way forward from a government and the Igbo people's perspective. What needs to happen in Nigeria?
I think there needs to be a lot of dialogue. The government, I think they've not really engaged the IPOD, which is called the Indigenous People of Biafra, headed by Kanu Nandi, who is in jail right now. I think there needs to be a lot of dialogue, and the army has given the protesters ultimatum to tone it down. So there needs to be a lot of dialogue, not just with the group of young people that are hitting the street and protesting. There needs to also be a dialogue with the Igbo leaders, with Igbo politicians, traditional leaders, political leaders, and importantly, we would love to see Kanu Nandi under detention have his days in court. The charges of treason and hate speech against him and trying to intimidate and people and all that. We need to be able to have his day in court. And I think that way then we'll be able to deal with it. But the major issue is an issue of leadership. This is an accumulation of lack of leadership over a long time, and lack of really social and also political leadership, lack of employment. You know, a lot of young people are not employed. So it's just a frustration that they're hitting the street doing that. So I feel the government needs to really quickly and fast enough really create avenues that is going to really tone this down, because we cannot have Boko Haram on one side of the country, and also now we have the people for the creation of Biafra in one part of the country.
Solomon, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll keep an eye on what is happening with the plight of the Igbo people. It's certainly very interesting. Let's hope there's not an escalation in violence over the weeks and months to come. But thank you once again for joining us.
Pleasure.
Of course, today we're looking at World AIDS Day. Let's now cross to Port Shepstone in KwaZulu-Natal for the main World AIDS Day event here in South Africa. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is speaking as we speak.
World AIDS Day. The first reason is to celebrate those who are living with HIV. We celebrate them because they have demonstrated their bravery, their courage, and commitment to live. And we saw it with Sibusiso here and Andrew. And we thank them for continuing to be alive. And Andrew will live beyond 70 years. We are sure about that. So on this day, we celebrate the lives of people around the globe who are living with HIV. The second reason is to evaluate the progress or lack thereof that we are making in fighting this pandemic. Fortunately, in South Africa, as many people have said, we've made tremendous progress. And we want to thank you, Michelle Sidibe, for having been the instigator, for having been the person who encouraged our Minister of Health to ensure that South Africa leads the charge on against this pandemic. And this day enables us to have that opportunity to evaluate. We have made a great deal of progress, but much more still needs to be done. It is also a day when we want to thank our partners, those who work with us, the UNAIDS, the Global Fund, PEPFAR, the US government, and many others who are working with us as our partners in this fight against HIV. But fourthly, it is an opportunity and a platform for us to recommit ourselves to achieve the objective of an HIV-free generation. Those are the principal 4 reasons why we celebrate this day. Now, in celebrating this day, we are also showing support for those living with HIV. This fight, in many ways, has brought all of humanity together. This day is also being celebrated, it's also being observed in many other parts of the world. And we are fortunate here that there are people who travel from far and afield to come and celebrate this day with us. Some from the US, some from Geneva, and some from Europe to come to be with us, which shows that they are our supporters, they are our true partners. Let us give a round of applause to our partners globally for the work that we do. Now, this fight against HIV has done more to unite the world than to divide it. This devastating virus has reminded us of our common humanity and our common vulnerability as well. It has also awakened us to our collective strength as well as our shared future. Those who support us did not need to support us. They did not need to be our partners. But because we have a shared future with them, they have decided to lend support, to give us a great deal of support materially as well as in other ways. We know that HIV infects and affects indiscriminately, but it thrives on ignorance, it thrives on conditions of poverty, it thrives on stigma, and it's in situations of unequal gender relations. It also thrives on destructive behavior, the abuse of alcohol and drugs, and unsafe sex. That's what makes this virus to thrive. It is therefore up to all of us collectively, as well as individuals, to take responsibility of our own health and the health of those we love and the health of those that we also know. Our theme for this World AIDS Day is Rise, Act, and Protect. As a nation, we must rise to this challenge. We must rise because we have to be determined and committed, as well as confident that we can succeed. The many steps that we have taken as a nation to address this pandemic were taken because we had a firm belief that yes, we would succeed, yes, we will become triumphant, and yes, we can make progress. As a people and as individuals, we must act to inform, we must also act to support and to encourage others. No action is too small, no contribution can ever be regarded as wasted. We must protect ourselves and those who are nearest to us. We must protect those amongst us who are vulnerable. We must combat stigma and create an environment in which all can feel comfortable enough to be tested and comfortable enough to get treatment. World AIDS Day serves as an important reminder that the epidemic is still with us and that we must do more to increase awareness and, more importantly, to eliminate prejudice. To achieve greater success in our intervention strategies, we must focus on at the local level and we must focus on the tasks that need to be taken at that local level for prevention as well as for treatment. Today represents and presents us with an opportunity to recognize, to applaud, and to support the outstanding work of our country's NGO sector and the AIDS champion who work tirelessly to educate people about HIV and empower them to prevent and treat and to manage it. We just saw champions from the local area of Ugu here, and we applaud them and we thank them for the wonderful work that they continue to do. And we call on all of us in various parts of the country to make sure that we create an environment in which champions like these ladies who stood here are able to do work to protect our communities and to raise the level of awareness. Let's give a round of applause again to our champions. And because of the consistent work of civil society, because of the consistent work of our champions, today we speak with one voice and a single message that we can make HIV and AIDS history. This is what we are saying with one voice today. And I'm very pleased that our members of civil society are here today. Last year, they celebrated World AIDS Day outside this tent. And today, they are here with us in this tent. They are not longer toy-toying against World AIDS Day. They are toy-toying together with us for World AIDS Day, and we thank them. They are here with us. The Department of Health and the South African National AIDS Council, SANAC, are committed to the UNAIDS fast-track approach of using innovative approaches informed by local knowledge and data to reach more people with comprehensive HIV prevention and treatment services. To strengthen our national response, we have recently completed research on the impact as well as the cost of an extensive range of known interventions against HIV and TB. This research proposes an optimal package of services to reach the most important groups in controlling the two diseases, HIV and TB. It confirms that we are correct as a country in our effort to significantly scale up the responses on both HIV and TB. This means that we will need to invest much more substantially over the medium term, but that we will start to save money over the long term as our prevention efforts begin to bear fruit when fewer and fewer people require treatment. This research encourages us to redouble our efforts to ensure that by 2020, 90% of people living with HIV know their status, that 90% of them are on treatment, and that 90% of those on treatment have suppressed viral loads. In our response to HIV and TB, we are driven by hope and encouraged by progress. We have invested massively in life-saving antiretrovirals, making our HIV treatment program the biggest in the world. South Africans are now living longer, and fewer people are dying of AIDS and tuberculosis. We have significantly reduced mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and yes, we join you, Mr. Sidibe, in your hope that South Africa will one day and soon be declared like Cuba to have ended mother-to-child transmission of HIV. We are hoping that we will get there. In fact, we are not only hoping, we are determined that we will get there. I went to Cuba with a number of deputy ministers. Dr. Partha was also in the delegation, and we were deeply impressed by how a country like Cuba, a small island country, had finally eliminated mother-to-child transmission. And we sat there quietly one evening and said, this we can do too as South Africa, and we made a pact that we are going to achieve this. And this we will achieve as South Africans, that we should reduce and bring to an end mother-to-child transmission of HIV. We are intensifying our efforts to end TB, particularly among high-risk populations such as prison inmates, mine workers, and people living in communities near our mines. We are improving our program to control and treat multi-drug resistant tuberculosis and more effectively integrating our national TB response with our HIV response. Individually and collectively, we continue to inform, we continue to fight stigma, and we continue to promote healthy lifestyles. You heard how our minister here had said that we are now launching a special TV program or channel that will just be focusing on health matters. And it is on this channel that we will invite all South Africans to at least have a look, at least 2-3 times a week, to get some tips, some lessons on how to continue to live healthy lifestyles. Despite our successes, thank you, despite our many successes, and we can record many successes indeed, of how this government has made strides to tackle the scourge of HIV, and indeed also tackling the scourge of TB. Despite all this, we still face many challenges. The number of new HIV infections is still extremely high, particularly among young women and girls. Among young women and girls. And this is where last year I made a call. I made a call that all these sugar daddies must leave our children alone. All these sugar daddies, leave our children alone. Go to your age group. Don't go to vulnerable girls and women. And we also call on young women and girls, please leave these sugar daddies. They are dangerous. Leave them out of your life. This we say because we are told that up to 2,300 young girls, as Mr. Michel Sidibe said, are becoming infected per week. And this affects young girls of ages 15 and 24. On a weekly basis, 2,300 become infected. We cannot carry on like this. This has to come to an end. We've got to bring this figure down, and it must start with the adults. The sugar daddies must stop molesting our children. We therefore mount a highly visible national campaign to decrease new HIV infections, particularly in this group. We are going to mount such a campaign to raise the awareness of young girls about the danger of sugar daddies, the dangers of having unprotected sex. While we have programs to reduce new infections in this group, we need a highly visible nationwide campaign to significantly reduce new infections amongst these young people. The SANAC women's and youth and men's sector must also work with the relevant government departments to develop a comprehensive approach to prevention that we can launch early next year. Through this campaign, we want to reduce new infections in this group by at least 30% over the next 3 years. To our community AIDS champions, those who are working hard, we urge you to work closely with our girl children. We would like you to focus your attention on these girl children. We look up to our girls to lead our country in the future, and we cannot allow a situation where they will be wasted along the way. We look up to women to build and to guide our prosperous nation. And if we do not stop this type of behavior, we will not have such women who will be able to lead our nation. Women like Albertina Sisulu, Lillian Goy, Helen Joseph, and many others. When a woman objects to sex with a male who does not use a condom, the woman is protecting herself as well as the man. If he cares about the woman's well-being, he will take care and use a condom. We urge all our young people to be patient, to respect your parents, to get an education, and to abstain. And if you do incline to participate in sexual activity, protect yourself and use a condom. And if we do this, we will be able to triumph. Programs that were started in this province, for this province has been leading in many, many ways. The program like Zazi campaign, which seeks to empower young women, can promote self-confidence among the youth so that they can make positive choices. We must equip young people with the tools to resist peer pressure, to avoid teenage pregnancy, and to define their own values that will secure them a healthy and prosperous future. We must admit that there's quite a lot of peer pressure among young people, and we must raise the level of consciousness among young people about the dangers of peer pressure, because the pressure that they are put under is if you're a young girl, you have not yet slept with a young man, then you are not as good as you ought to be or like others. And in some areas, if you have not had your first child by a particular age, then it means that you are not as good a woman as you should be. And the problem with that type of peer pressure is that it then introduces other actors into the mix, your sugar daddies and all of them. We need to spread the word about prevention, encouraging all sexually active South Africans to use condoms consistently. We all have a responsibility to encourage people to test for HIV and TB. We call upon men in particular to avail themselves in their millions for free HIV testing and counseling at our public health services. It is important to be tested. We encourage men to go to clinics and hospitals to do so. And we join His Majesty, King Goodwill Zwelithini, and our traditional leaders in encouraging men to undergo safe male circumcision. Even when you are circumcised, you should still use a condom to increase your protection and the protection of your partner as well. We need to ensure that all those who need treatment do receive treatment and that they remain on treatment as well. We shall not overcome this epidemic unless all of us accept that this is a collective responsibility. Now, this should be easy for us to do because those who don't even live in this country, who are not even a part of our population mix, have made it their responsibility to join us in this effort. People in Switzerland, people in the United States, people in many other countries have decided to join us and become our partners. Now, it should not be difficult for us as South Africans to accept responsibility for the safety, the protection of those who are near us. We have a responsibility as a government and its employees, as every sector of civil society, as communities, as religious institutions, as youth groups, and as well as sports and music idols. All of us have a responsibility. In our personal lives, in our own behavior, we also have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as parents, as spouses, as partners, as girlfriends and boyfriends, mentors and role models. We have a responsibility to ourselves. And we also have a responsibility to others. As we commemorate World AIDS Day, let us work harder in all our communities and with determination to secure an AIDS-free South Africa and an AIDS-free world. This is the time for all of us to rise. This is the time for all of us to act. And this is the time for all of us to protect. It is the time, yes, to rise against HIV. It is the time, yes, to act against the spreading of more infections. It is the time, yes, to protect those who are near us. Masisukumeni sonke, sakhane, sisebenze ngokuqiniseka ukuthi lesifo sisehlise ngempela. Now, umsebenzi owenza uhulumeni umkhulu kakhulu lapha eSouth Africa. Uhulumeni usebenzile impela no premier wethu simzwile echaza ukuthi la eKZN kwenzwani na. Into engifanele ukuthi nginqome abantu balapha eKZN ngayo ile campaign, iproject enayiqala isukuma sakhe. Siyanqoma kakhulu. Futhi siphinde sinbonge ukuthi you conceptualize isukuma sakhe campaign, and leyo campaign manje sesiyayithatha siyisa kwamanye ama-province. Amanye ama-province alandela i-example ebekwe yini bala eKZN. Siyanibonga impela ukuthi niyahola, nihambela ngaphambili, siyakubonga konke lokho. Masikhuluma nalamanye ama-province sithi masambeni siye KZN, masambeni siyobona kahle ukuthi bayenzani na. I am going to be leading the premiers of our country to come to KZN so that we can go on the ground, so that everyone can go and see how Sukuma Sake is actually working, because it is working. I want to therefore end by saying thank you very much, Premier Senzo Mkhunu. Thank you very much, Minister MEC Wethu Lapha, for all the work that you continue to do. We take our lead from what you are doing. And thank you very much as well for managing the various partnerships that you have built with a number of global organizations. We thank you. KZN leads, and the others will follow, and they will learn from you as KZN. Thank you very much.
A round of applause as our Deputy President is going to the his seat.
Now, it's World AIDS Day today. We're asking you a very prevalent question in terms of what you make of the various myths that one has heard over the many months and years. What are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? Now, to mark the World Health Organization, or to mark World AIDS Day, the joint UN program on HIV/AIDS have called for antiretroviral therapies to be made available to all people living with the virus. Now, this will be key to ending the epidemic by 2030.
Despite major strides in combating the spread of HIV, AIDS is the leading cause of death among African teenagers and the second most common killer globally.
I talked about adolescent deaths tripling since 2000. That translates to 26 infections every hour. It's the top cause of death for 15 to 19-year-olds in Africa, the second largest cause of death for adolescents globally. I have 7 out of 10 of those infections are girls, so girls way disproportionately affected other than boys. And half of these are in just 6 countries, and so targeting those 6 countries is, is crucially important.
Those 6 countries are South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania and India, as the drive to close the gap between those infected and those on ARV treatment intensifies.
There's 21 million who need treatment today who don't get it, and around 19 million of those don't know their status. So there has to be a huge effort on testing. We, as part of our strategy, have launched a target of 90-90-90, where by 2020 we want to get 90% of people infected with HIV tested so that they know their status.
UNAIDS estimating that by 2020 they will require $31 billion annually to break the trajectory of the virus. And despite broad availability of diagnostic testing globally, only half the people with HIV around the world know that they are carriers. Thus, closing the gap between knowing one's status and getting treatment remains among the biggest challenges in stopping the spread of HIV within the next 15 years. Shervin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
South Africa has made significant strides in the fight against HIV/AIDS in the past couple of years. However, with an increase of new infections among young women and girls in the country, the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, has urged South Africans to play their part in protecting what he says are vulnerable young girls.
You'll be aware that 14 countries in the East and Southern African region, between those 14 countries, every week there are 5,000 new infections of girls between the ages of 15 and 24. Very unfortunately, half of that is in one country, and that is South Africa. We don't really have one clear answer. We don't really have one clear answer. We believe it's a conglomeration of many factors that are coming together. One of them being, the HIV/AIDS pandemic was devastating, especially to women. Many young girls are orphans. Their mothers have passed on. And so they are vulnerable to sugar daddies, who promise them a better life, who promise them finances, etc. But then they don't really have mothers to guide. Many of them get out of school early. Many of them are having a problem of teenage pregnancy, which makes them vulnerable to this whole thing. Now, our conclusion is this, Ayanda. The successes you are talking about, if you look at them, are mostly on the biomedical side. That means our biomedical interventions have been hugely successful, like the issue of mother-to-child transmission, whereby only 10 years ago, 70,000 children were born HIV positive in South Africa. But because of the success of the prevention of mother-to-child transmission, the PMCTC program, now the figure is down to about 7,000, lower than 7,000. That's a dramatic drop, as you can see. So that's a biomedical intervention. But then the socio-behavioral intervention, that is the one that is a problem in the country. That means the interventions whereby you must change the social settings and the behavior of people. That is where Southern and Eastern African region of the continent is suffering from, and that's where South Africa is suffering from. That is why we launched the DREAM project 2 weeks ago with the ambassador of United States and the ambassador of PEPFAR, because they are funding that project to the tune of 800 million rand for 10 countries in the Southern and Eastern region to try and deal with this issue of young women. And we believe we were inviting society to rise up, act and protect those young people, especially men. In the DREAMS program, we want to target men because they are the ones who are causing this problem. There's no sugar daddy without a man. They are the ones who are taking advantage of these young girls because we have got statistics that shows that in that age group, young girls are 4 times more likely to get HIV positive than young boys of the same age group. So who is infecting these young girls? It can't be the young boys because the young boys are HIV AIDS-free at that age. It is the older men, and they are using their economic power and their patriarchal power and the power that societal power. So all those things need the whole society to think.
Now, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has appealed to South Africans to continue to work towards an AIDS-free society. The Deputy President delivered a keynote address at the main World AIDS Day event in Gamalake, near Port Shepstone in the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal, under the theme, Rise, Act and Protect. Now, for the latest, we go to our SABC reporter, Blaine Herman, who is standing by with the Health Minister there. Very good morning to you once again, Blaine.
Yeah, a very good morning to you, Elvis. Back live from the Ugu Sports and Leisure Centre here in KwaZulu-Natal, Port Shepstone. And it is indeed World AIDS Day 2015. Look, we know the magnitude of the problem. It's huge. We're talking about over 6 million people that are living with HIV in South Africa. We know over 300,000 people newly infected each year. That number works out to roughly about 1,000 new infections per day. It's stark, it's a reality, but we need to confront it. Government is trying to put paid to new infections. There's a number of awareness programs that's taking place, a number of community engagements. I think that's key, community engagements and dialogue, and also an increase in terms of ARV therapy treatment. And then there's the National Strategic Plan on HIV, STIs and TB between 2012 and 2016. That's in place, giving us a sense of where we are at this stage. Let's continue this conversation. Let's further this conversation. Aaron Motsoaledi, the Health Minister, joins me now live. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. We just heard the Deputy President highlighting where we are, some of the challenges, some of the progress, I guess, we've made over the couple of years. What stood out for you in terms of the speech?
Well, indeed, we have made progress, but he was emphasizing the fact that we're not yet there. Because the progress we are making is largely on biomedical interventions. We have hugely been successful. I mean, the most impactful thing he said, for instance, when he quoted that we have been very successful in prevention of mother-to-child transmission to an extent where we believe that we can actually be a country that can follow the example of Cuba, totally eliminate mother-to-child transmission. Why do we believe that? Because only 10 years ago we had 70,000 new infections every year. That means 70,000 babies born HIV positive every year. Today the figure is below 7,000. Yeah. It's a dramatic improvement. So that is the biomedical. Now what is worrying us is the socio-behavioral interventions. That means the behavior of people to play safe sex, use condoms, make sure that they don't easily get infected. That is the part that is worrying us, because that part is in the hands of individuals, in the manner in which they behave themselves, socially and otherwise.
Well, the social and economic impact of AIDS is huge, isn't it? And let's just talk about the ARV programs. It's one of the largest in the world. But there are some concerns about, can government afford this? It's providing free ARVs for everybody in this country in terms of people that are living with HIV.
You know, I've been asked this question many times, and I've got one standard answer. Can we afford not to? Can we afford not to? You can't let so many people get infected and survive socially, economically, politically, and otherwise. So the question we must answer is, can we afford not to put people on treatment? And the answer is always no. We can't afford not to. We have to treat everybody. Otherwise, everything will collapse in the country.
It's a must, isn't it?
It's a must.
For
both HIV, AIDS, and TB, it's a must. That's why we are running the dual program of 1990 for both TB and HIV and AIDS.
So you confirming money will be found, whatever the case?
We have to. We have got no option. We have to. Remember, when we started this program, which is now massive, in 2009, there were only 923,000 people on ARVs. I was asked the same question. Can we afford to? Today, we are having 3.4 million people on treatment. The same question is being asked, can we afford to? So it will keep on being asked, but we'll keep on moving forward for the simple reason that we've got no option at all.
Yeah, progress indeed. You know, this province, we've got, what, 16.9% of the population that have AIDS. We just reported last month that the 1 millionth person in this province was put on ARVs. You're saying 3.4 million people on the program nationally.
Yes, important. Exactly. I mean, look at TB. Every one person who's got TB will infect 15 others in their lifetime. Can we afford not to treat that one person? For instance, when we said there's a lot of TB in correctional service facilities, I went to give them, you know, gene expert technology. In Portsmouth, for instance, we even put a small laboratory there for gene expert technology. We put on a unit, a mobile X-ray unit inside the hospital, a digital X-ray, I mean to say, to help them. And they were saying, why do you do this for prisoners? You are not doing it for ordinary citizens. I said, no. If prisoners are carrying a lot of TB and I don't treat them, I'm doing you a disfavor because they will infect you. Because each one has got the capacity to infect 15 others. So if you can't treat one person, you must know you are killing 15 people. So that's why I'm saying we've got no choice but to make sure that as far as HIV and AIDS and TB programs are concerned, we find the money and we make sure that the programs are implemented.
Minister, I know you're rushing off. Just tell us the program for today. You're visiting a number of wards as well in this area?
Yes, we are going to visit a lot of wards. I understand there are going to be about 23 community meetings that around this area to see what they are doing and encourage them.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Minister of Health, Aaron Motsoaledi. Lots of work to be done here. World AIDS Day really offers us a chance to reflect on some of the challenges that we still need to address and also unite in the fight against HIV. That's how we wrap things up. It's back to the studio.
Thank you, Blaine. Now, there are many non-governmental and community organizations that are working in the field of HIV and AIDS. But they do not get the recognition or sometimes the exposure for the tremendous work that they are doing. One such organization is COMOSAT, a non-governmental organization founded in 1985 and currently operating in KwaZulu-Natal. The founder of COMOSAT, Khetswana Mashlase, now joins us in our Durban studios to talk about their abilities or activities there. A very good morning to you and welcome, ma'am.
Good morning, sir, and good morning to the viewers.
Now, you are from a nursing and a health background. Please tell us about what is it that your organization is involved with in the field of HIV and AIDS.
Currently, my organization is involved in encouraging communities to go for HIV testing. We realize that if we want to reach to zero infection by 2030, it is quite important that everyone knows their HIV status so that they can get treated, and by so doing, they reduce their infectability. And so what we are doing, we are trying to normalize this epidemic of HIV. We're providing a number of services. We do assessment for diabetes. We also assess people for hypertension, and then we also talk about STIs, about TB, and then we do the HIV testing so that people can see, so that people can understand that HIV is just like one of the chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you manage to operate, especially in the rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal, where poverty is rife, which we know, and with orphan child-headed homes and working with women who often depend on their men for their income?
Yes, we were quite fortunate that we are currently working with a well-known organization called CAPRISA. And CAPRISA, we know that they are doing a lot of research. So what we are doing, we are out in the community for people to understand research and also to help mobilize the communities. We are working mainly in the Umgungundlovu district, out in the communities, because it is these people out in the communities that we need to encourage to come forward for testing. Otherwise, if we are staying in the clinics, if we are staying in the hospital, there are many people that are going to be left out in the communities. As we can see, there are people who have never had checks for diabetes, they've never checked for hypertension, and they've never been checked for HIV. Hence, it is important for other people to go and work out there.
Mm. Now, what were some of the crucial lessons that you've learned from this project, especially surrounding the secrecy of HIV/AIDS and people talking about sex?
Yes. I think what I've learned, as you know, that I started working in HIV and AIDS a long time ago, is that at least stigma is still there, but it is not like what I used to see in the 90s and early 2000s. But I've also learned that, you know, communities are people and they just need that push. They need education. They need to understand why things are done and why we're encouraging them to go for testing. But we're also encouraging them to work as a unit, to work as a family, to support each other, because it is in so doing that people will not be scared to go and test for HIV. They will know that at least even if I test HIV positive and I go back home and I tell them about my status, I will be accepted. And if we encourage the whole family to test, because we go we take a mobile service. We go there and people come to the mobile, we advertise beforehand, but we also go to their homes. And those that prefer to be tested at home, we test them at home, so they can test as a family. Maybe all the others, they do not want to test as a family, but in so doing, by visiting them in their homes, we get many people agreeing to testing. And we can encourage them to stay as a unit and to support each other, so that the one who tested positive will be free to say, you know, I am now HIV positive. You need that support from home more than you need the support from the community.
Now, that's very important, but you also focus on men. How difficult is it to break those barriers and sometimes address the patriarchal and the traditional behaviors of men?
You know, I started working with men, interestingly, in 1998, and I found it to be easy. I think men are afraid to be sick. Men are afraid to die. And men, on the other hand, they pretend to be strong and they pretend to, you know, they want women to be afraid of them. But if you talk to them, if you talk to men, they do listen and they do take things seriously. And also, you know, by bringing to their attention that this society is patriarchal, we look at you as our fathers, we look at you as our brothers, and we expect you to protect our mothers, protect our daughters, our sisters, protect your children. And in that way, you are creating a sense of responsibility and a sense of ownership and a sense of, you know, men need to be responsible people. And therefore, they listen. Even though it is not easy, but we are seeing a trend now where when we started, more women came for testing. And maybe they will test about 50 women and there will be only one man. But now, men in that communities are quickly catching up. At times it is like 50%, 50%. So I think we are getting there. But what also helps is that in that community, we did a lot of work around voluntary male medical circumcision, and they appreciated it. We did a lot of education. We went back to them to find out how they were doing. So already we are accepted in that community. And when we go back now to ask for their support in these other issues, it is not so difficult. But also these men in that community...
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for your time and being with us, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
That's the founder of the Comosat Kgatswana Mashlashe, joining us from our Durban studios to talk about their activities there. Let's now move on here in Pretoria. The Pretoria studio, we have two organizations operating from Ga-Rankuwa and Mamelodi. Dakeni Home Care Nursing Services focus on HIV/AIDS information and prevention, awareness of substance abuse, and is represented by the Executive Director, Ms. Regina Mokokong. And from Ga-Rankuwa, the young adults against HIV/AIDS, is David Marakala. A very good morning to both of you and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's start off first and foremostly with yourself, Ms. Mokogeng. Your organization, tell us about your organization and your role in the HIV/AIDS field.
Thank you very much and good morning, everybody. Tateni was an organization that was established because the then founder member, Mrs. Veronica Khoza, had realized how the people that were HIV positive were stigmatized, discriminated against, and were not very much looked after. So she realized that they needed to be cared for, and she assembled a few women together, professionals, teachers, social workers who were retired, to form a group that then looked after these people in their respective homes. And that is how Tateni grew as a home-based care organization. She then designed a model of training so that the young ones that were not professional, like the social workers and the nurses, could also be trained to look after the people at home. And there was this training that also was accepted by the then Provincial Department of Health, and many organizations came over to Tateni to study the model. Now, what we are doing and continuing to do is, after realizing that Tateni was then also becoming known as an HIV/AIDS organization, and then the people were, when they saw our care workers going into the homes of people, then they say, oh, it means there is somebody in that house with AIDS. Then we then said, no, let us rather not only say we are doing AIDS, we are doing care, comprehensive care for everybody, be it a diabetic in the home, be it a stroke, whatever, so that the people in the homes are protected from this stigma, knowing that in that house there is somebody with AIDS when they see one of our carers going in. Now, we also have taken over the care and support of orphans and vulnerable children. And for this group of children, we have established what we call drop-in centers, which are after-school care centers where children come to the center and then they are fed and then they are engaged in developmental activities. And then also in these drop-in centers, you are able also to note if there is anything wrong with the child. And you also get the opportunity to educate the children, the youth that come to the centers on the prevention of HIV/AIDS. We can also do the screening of tuberculosis and note any other psychosocial behavior that may also be seen in the children that we are working with.
Yes,
and also we work with the parents of these children in these centers, because then we would... you want to say something?
That's some fantastic work you're doing there, Regina. Let me just go to David quickly. David, Mr. Marakala, from your work with the youth, how do you reach and appeal to the youth? Because they are a very vulnerable group.
Yeah, what we do awareness through community mobilization. And then in our organization, most are the youth. And then because of the issue of behavioral change in our organization, our youth that are going into the community to spread the issue of how HIV/AIDS enter in the body of a person, they've been trained by Medical Research Unit, because we are having a relationship with them. So based on that, our youth, most of them at schools, because of after school, it happens that they go and do mobilization there. So in the issue of how impact that we are doing, yes, we are doing impact because most of the schools, they know that Harango Young Adults Youth, they are on their schools in terms of training them, giving them information, the new information about the HIV virus.
Now, lastly, Regina, just very briefly, you're a very small organization operating within the townships there. Are you making any impact?
I think we do, in terms of really spreading the education amongst the children and the youth and the families, And also having access to these homes, one is able to build a relationship with the family and then convince them of the health measures that should be observed, especially they would be agreeable to coming forward for HCT to do the testing, and we are very much emphasizing the importance of knowing your status. We still have a problem in reaching the men though, but those that we have convinced in the homes as we visit around have come, and we hope soon they will also be catching up with the idea of prevention is better than cure.
Thank you so much to both of you. That was the Executive Director, Ms. Regina Mokgokong, from Ga-Rankuwa, and from Ga-Rankuwa, the Young Adults Against HIV/AIDS, David Marakala. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us in our Pretoria studio. Now, it seems like that's all we have for you at this point in time. We have a song for you to play, I think, or before we go to sports news. Oh yes, Kendall Makamate is standing by with your sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and hopefully we'll be able to play that song before we end off with the show, because it's definitely an apt one to be hearing today. Now, former Athletics South Africa CEO and Secretary General of the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee boss, Banele Sindani, has been killed in Johannesburg. Sindani was shot once in the abdomen in a burglary at his home in Reimsig, this on the West Rand last night, and he died on the scene. He was 60 years old, and we do hope that his soul rests in peace. And in other news that came in a little earlier this morning, Clive Barker and Maritzburg United have parted ways. The 1996 Africa Cup of Nations winning coach had taken over from Mandla Ntikazi on September the 25th and has only been in charge for 6 league matches. Even though the club did not lose its last 2 league matches, beating Tuks 1-0 and drawing 1-1 with Chiefs, Maritzburg is still bottom of the table, which is 5 points from 11 fixtures. And then going on to other sports news making headlines, 3 leading Kenyan athletics officials have been suspended by the Ethics Commission of Athletics' governing body, the IAAF, over the potential submersion of the anti-doping control process, this in the African country. The latest casualties in the IAAF doping scandal, Athletics Kenya President Isaiah Kiplagat, Vice President David Okeyo and 2015 World Championships team leader Joseph Kinyua have been suspended for 180 days. This in the interests of the integrity of the sport. The trio also face accusations that they were involved in the potential improper diversion from Athletics Kenya of funds received from Nike. This for having allegedly made personal withdrawals from sponsorship funds. The IAAF also said a prima facie case had also been found to exist in respect of Mr. Kiplagat in relation to receipt of apparent gifts of 2 motor vehicles. This from the Qatar Athletics Federation in 2014. And that's where we're going to leave it with a sport, because we're now going to be closing off the show. And I do believe that we might even be able to play that song. But having said that, Elvis, I think we've got comments first. Yeah, we get some questions. We ask you the question, of course, what are some of the myths that you continue to hear about HIV/AIDS? And here are some of your comments. Let's take a look at some of the brighter here. Start with you, Kendall. There was Chris Pumalani. Yeah, he reckons HIV is a deadly sickness.
We have another one here from Ali Bai. He says there is a myth that the HIV virus was artificially designed as a biological weapon. Now, that's a conspiracy theory there.
Absolutely. And still has not been proven yet. And Zama Abumkiza, don't use the same glass to drink either water with a person who's HIV positive. Oh, that's definitely one of the myths that we want to be hearing about today.
Chris Pumlani again, some believe that HIV/AIDS is it's a generational sickness.
Wow.
That's another one there.
Wow.
Now, these are some of your comments. You can keep them coming while we get off air, and you can still continue that conversation on the Twitter page. But that's where we got to leave it. Here's a song for you. I'm a survivor, and you can be a survivor in an AIDS-free generation. From myself, Elvis Preslin.
And me, Kendall Makamati.
Eben Janssen will join us tomorrow morning. He's had to go and do something else, but he'll be back tomorrow morning with us. We'll see you then. Ciao for now. Enjoy the song.
Licamos.
Yes, I will succeed in that.